Namaste. My name is Sethi and I run the Diabesties Foundation in India. The Diabesties Foundation works on advocacy, awareness and education programs for those living with type 1 diabetes. And type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune condition. I'm very happy to be speaking at the LifeVestInside World Kindness Day event. When I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes 11 years ago, I was in a very paradoxical space. My mind was like a vacuum, empty and numb. And at the same time, I was bombarded with information, numbers, doses, techniques, and it was overwhelming to say the least. At that very instance, all I wanted was someone to look me in the eye and say, it's going to be all right. The world of health is often fraught with words that sometimes bring more fear than comfort to a person already struggling with a life filled with doubt and uncertainty. This is done with good intent by our doctors, in an attempt to provide advice and clarity. But for someone like me, who's actually living with a chronic condition, it does less to provide motivation and more hesitation. The words, phrases, and the way they are being used by those close to us and those around us, wove into a deeply subconscious narrative that made me feel like I was a patient suffering from type 1 diabetes. It was only much later did I truly start feeling the weight of these words. We live in a world today where we are constantly internalizing the messages from social media, the news, and the conversations we hear and participate in. And we don't realize the effect of these words and phrases until we start believing them. And that's why the Diabesties Foundation was involved in creating the Indian version of the Language Matters Diabetes Guide. These documents discuss the role of language when dealing with type 1 diabetes in our country. And we worked with colleagues from the UK, translated the versions that they had worked on, and it's a very unique guide that we use when talking about language and diabetes. We adapted it into an Indian document, right? But for our context and our scenario. Language has such an important role in healthcare, and more so in a chronic condition. Since there is no cure, your healthcare professionals almost become lifelong partners in your journey of management. To build a relationship based on honest communication is paramount. Unfortunately, because of time constraint, overwhelming number of patients and other external factors, specifically in India, a doctor's appointment becomes something that you just have to check off the list. The doctor maybe spends 2 minutes with you, and it's often spent just writing a prescription and offering instructions. There is no equity in the partnership, and that does very little to actually empower the person living with the condition. As people with diabetes, we want to have someone we choose to go to and not someone that we are forced to go to. We've heard some disheartening stories about doctors using scare tactics to influence their patients. And that is where the role of these guides actually come in. We have tried to broadly cover some topics and philosophies as we living with diabetes want to see in these interactions, and it's now grown into a global movement. Recently, we launched the Language Matters Diabetes website, which is an evolving home for all of these documents in one place. And it's so heartwarming to see people all over the world contribute to this movement. And it also proves that there's actually such a need for it as well. In my opinion, these guides are not meant to be rule books. They are simply meant to offer perspective. Hear from voices that are coming from lived experience. These documents don't just talk about phrases and words that can be substituted for friendlier alternatives, They also discuss things like non-verbal communication, language that family uses, and general practices that can make the conversation more collaborative and less confrontational. For me personally, language matters has never been about words. It's always been about the intention behind the words. It's always been about how a smile can promise things no amount of words can. It's always been about listening with our senses. It's always been about co-creating the treatment plan and being considerate and caring about invisible battles that sometimes leave no scars. According to me, empathy is the most basic foundation that should create the fabric of any conversation we're having. Everyone is going through something that we don't know and we don't understand. And if that understanding is weaved into the conversation, not just with our healthcare professionals, but with everyone we speak to, we can all be more kinder, more empathetic, and more understanding. As someone living with type 1 diabetes, we want to be confident that our healthcare professional, our friends, and our family can actually become our confidants. We want to know that you won't judge our values, you won't scold us for being too high, and you won't scare us with complications. We hope that you will see the names behind the numbers, the stories behind the statistics, and the people behind the patients. And I don't think language matters only pertains to the healthcare industry and the healthcare department. I think now, more than ever, we all need to know that the language we use can play deep impacts in our lives, especially with what's going on in the world right now. I think we all need to be a little bit more empathetic and a little bit more sensitive to those around us. And does this mean that we need to weigh our words? Not at all. It simply means that we need to be a little bit more empathetic to someone who we know nothing about. So I really think when we're talking about World Kindness Day and we're talking about being kinder to one another, I think we have to really understand the role that language plays, because at the end of the day, language does matter, be it in diabetes and in the works we are doing, or just be it in everyday conversations. Because at the end of the day, we are human by chance, but we most certainly can be humane by choice. Thank you so much. If you do want to check out these guys, please just head on to languagemattersdiabetes.com. You can check out the work we are doing at diabesties.com, and just live happily, be kind to one another, and thank you so much.